There are some legal, there's some scientific, there's some ethical questions about this whole experiment. I just want to also say that the AP coverage was fair. It was totally accurate, and in fact, AP hasn't even begun to report on the serious health and environmental problems that have been linked to the land application of sewage sludge. There is no scientific evidence that this practice is safe. There's a lot of deception. There's a lot of cover-up of incidents. David Lewis is one of the victims. He was courageous enough to get into this. Very few scientists go into this because they realize that being a whistleblower in this particular issue is a very risky practice, and he lost his job by actually doing research and publishing the link between human health and the use of sludge. So the statement by Dr. Klag that this is safe and that it is germ-free is a totally false statement. The way sludge is treated to reduce pathogens does not kill all the germs, so the families were misinformed about that, and they were misinformed by being told it was risk-free. We have incidences where actually people, landscapers who've used this material and touched it have gotten skin infections and respiratory problems. We have incidences that the most famous of all sludge compost, namely milorganite, which is more famous than orgro, had salmonella regrown in it, and when it was shipped to Canada, it did not pass the Canadian fertilizer rules, and it had to be shipped back to the United States. We have another incident with milorganite, or with the plant that produces the sludge that goes into milorganite in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The Class A sludge was spread on 24 playing fields where children play, and after it was spread, they discovered it had such high levels of cancer-causing PCBs that it had turned these playgrounds into Superfund sites. So they had to actually scrape all that stuff up again, truck it away to another state where it was put into hazardous waste landfills.
I'd like to bring back Dr. Michael Klag into the discussion. A couple of points that Dr. Carolyn Snyder raised, Dr. Klag. One, about the issue of the difference between this sludge and what she calls clean compost and why you didn't use that, and also the issue of whether the processes to clean Class A sludge really get rid of all of the contaminants that exist in it.
Well, I'm not an environmental expert. My point is that this study was done 8 years ago using the best information available at that time, using a product that's approved by the federal and state governments for unrestricted use and that is widely used.
Yeah,
it wasn't the product that was shown in the picture in that article, which is type B sludge, and which there has been much concern about. So what I want to talk about is that this article had misrepresentations about the study and the way it was done, and created innuendos about transparency and other things that just aren't true.
Well, could I make a statement about that? I don't think it's a very good idea to base opinions on pictures, but I'm going to do that too. I've looked very carefully at the fossil article. First of all, the soil that was churned up by rototillers was not bare blowing around. It was compacted and it was held together by plants. So now the researchers come with high-power rototillers and start tilling this lead contaminated, and it was highly contaminated, 2,500 parts per million of lead. They start tilling this up right by the basement windows in the middle of summer, tilling it up, loosening up all the soil that had been compacted. Then they add the sludge compost. Then they till it up for a second time. And I think this whole process has actually exposed the children and the families to additional, to higher risks than if they had perhaps left it alone. There was no need to do this experiment in the front yards of residential neighborhoods. It could have been done on an empty lot somewhere in the city. to do this, and they didn't fence it in? Did they tell the families to keep their windows closed in the middle of the summer where there's no air conditioning? Did they tell them there was no fence so pets could play in it, children could play in it, they could track the stuff down there, not now only exposed to ingestion by accidentally eating the soil, they are now being exposed through inhalation and dermal contact as well. So we feel not only that the sludge itself sludge compost presented an additional risk, but the actual process of putting this material into leaded soil was an additional exposure route to lead. If the Krieger Institute is really interested, if society is really interested in protecting children from lead poisoning, they should move families out of those houses, clean up the houses, cover up the soil, and not have children in this rich country be exposed to high levels of lead, and then in addition to the risks that are associated with sludge.
Dr. Michael Klag, your response.
Certainly. Well, I don't know if the doctor's ever been to Baltimore, but in 2000, we were suffering one of the worst epidemics in the world of lead poisoning in children. Kennedy Krieger Institute was seeing over 1,000 cases a year of lead poisoning. As you know, lead poisoning causes growth retardation, decreased cognitive status, decreased IQ, behavioral problems, and is a predictor of getting in trouble with the law many years later. And it's irreversible once it occurs. So the people at Kennedy Krieger were treating all these children from the same neighborhoods year after year, neighborhoods with very high levels of lead in the homes, most of which was from paint, but some which is from soil exposure. They were trying to find ways to prevent lead poisoning before it occurred. This was one of the studies in which they did that. It would be ideal to knock all those homes down, to abate entirely the neighborhood. But 95% of the housing stock was built before 1978 when lead was removed from paint. The kinds of solutions that are being suggested aren't practical. So the investigators were looking for a way to do this. It had been shown in industrial settings, around lead smelters, that putting compost in the soil reduced bioavailable lead. It had been shown in a laboratory in Baltimore that if you took the soil from yards to the laboratory, treated it, grew grass, you reduced bioavailable lead. So we knew that this had been done. There had been thought of doing it in a vacant lot, as the doctor suggests, but the problem with that approach is that the grass needed to be maintained. The idea here is that if you have grass growing, you don't track the dust and dirt into the house. So it needed to be maintained. And also, because of the neighborhoods in which this was done, it was not safe for the workers to go into the vacant lots. So the other thing I should mention is this compost was picked in part because the community had been using it in community gardens as part of a greening project. So this was something that had been used by the community for many years. And that's one of the reasons the product was picked.
Well, just because it's used does not mean it's safe. Let me very quickly tell you what legally is allowed to be in sludge compost. 41 parts per million of arsenic, 39 parts per million of cadmium, 300 parts per million of lead. Now, what on earth, what sense does it make to put a polluted compost in these already polluted yards that already contains lead? Why use this particular controversial material? It's very controversial to use, and there's very little difference really between Class A sludge and Class B sludge. Class A sludge contains virtually the same amounts legally of toxic metals, toxic organics, tens of thousands. We only regulate a handful of these. There was absolutely no excuse for using sludge as the vehicle to deliver phosphate and iron.
We only have a minute to go. Final comments, first from Dr. Michael Klag.
Well, I would say that the Maryland requirements are much stricter than the federal requirements. Just quoted. This was a study in 9 yards of using a store-bought compost to grow grass. And it was one in an incredibly high-risk neighborhood that helped these families by providing lawns. The article, the AP article, is inaccurate in many ways about this study.
I think your comments are inaccurate, very inaccurate, by telling the families that there were no germs in it, that it was safe, that it would make their yard safe. What is going to prevent them from growing vegetables there? And think of the risk then.
We're going to have to leave it there, and I thank you both for being with us, but we'll continue to follow the story. Dr. Caroline Snyder, Professor Emeritus at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and Dr. Michael Klag, Dean of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both for being with us. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. We'll be back in a minute.